So I want to welcome everybody to Psalm 46. We're making progress, and 46 today, 47 tomorrow. Then next week will be 48 and 49. The week after, we'll do only one class, and that'll be 50, which will give us the opportunity to pause, and we'll resume after Yom Kippur. But I am delighted to know that with your encouragement, we've been able to gather consistently over these months. And every psalm, as I was beginning to say, for me, has an element of familiarity, but only an element. And the opportunity to delve deeper is filled with surprise and delight. Today, Psalm 46, one of the authors of Psalms, Moses Buttenwieser, I assume that's whom the 92nd Street Y Big Hall is named for in New York City, wrote a book on Psalms, and he said of Psalm 46, quote, the greatest song of faith ever written. This psalm is familiar to some of us from a line that's part of our Havdalah. It's actually a refrain. It'll be verses 8 and then the closing line of verse 10. Adonai tzvot imanu misgavlanu Elohei Yaakov Selah. Adonai of hosts, who is with us, a fortress, is the God of Jacob. So that's a line in Hebrew that would ring familiar to many of us who do Havdalah. There's another line in this psalm. I'm going to show you, I hope I can show you. Here is my wall in my home office, and there is a quote on my wall, and it reads, Hirpu udu ki anochi Elohim. It was a gift from Adir Glick. It's right underneath the painting. And he gave that to me, and I didn't really know where it came from. In the King James Version and the way he translated verse 11, it's, be still and know that I am God. So it was given to me by a serious meditator as kind of a mantra for meditation. And there too, in Psalm 11, I gained the sense of its origins, and with that, a sense of greater significance. I am aware that there's a number of literature professors who participate. Normally, Julia is with us. She's one of my favorite Shakespeare authors. I don't know, I know Vivian is also used. Oh, there's Julia. All right, I'm going to wait. Here's why I'm waiting for Julia. There is in this psalm a claim that that's where Shakespeare got his name from. Now, check this out. This is from Wikipedia. The name Shakespeare is 10 letters long, 4 plus 6. If you take for this Psalm 46, in King James, the 46th word from the beginning is the word shake, and the 46th word from the end, if you take out the selahs, is spear in the King James translation. So there are those who claim that Psalm 46 is where the playwright got his playwright name from. So I don't know if it's true, but for my Shakespeare friends, you know, there's just, you can't help but smile in terms of appreciating the impact of Psalms. And clearly, Psalms are at the center of religious texts for Christians and Jews, and in that sense, at the center of literature. They're also at the center of national memory. And in a moment, I'm going to play a special reading of the King James Version, a variation of Psalm 46 as my introduction today. Then I'll post mine and share with you a little analysis. And so let me just do that right now. I'm going to play this little clip for you. And then after he's done, I'll tell you why I think President Obama chose to read this. This is the 10th anniversary of the September 11th tragedy at the memorial. And in his presentation, he chose to read one psalm, and it's Psalm 46.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Even though the earth be removed, though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling, there is a river whose stream shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Come behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge.
Now, that particular choice for the memorial, again, that was the 10th anniversary of September 11th. And that psalm was chosen in that case, in that the psalm talks about power of nature, and I'm going to put it up and again and go over it. And then there's this messianic dimension at the end that talks about the end of war. And so as you'll see, those themes of being shaken and even shattered, both in nature, part 1, part 2 of the psalm, in geopolitical turmoil, that leads to hope and the breaking of spears and swords and the burnings of chariots. So a relatively short psalm, 12 verses, was well suited for that moment of trauma and memory at that moment of 2011. It's not clear what prompted, of course, the writing of the psalm, as many of them. So some commentators will say that this psalm, which is attributed to the sons of Korah, was said after their father was swallowed up by the earth as his punishment for rebellion. More commonly, there's a dramatic story in the Bible. It's in 2 Kings, chapters 18 and 19, Isaiah, chapters 36 and 37, about the Assyrian king, the one who had been in control of the northern part of what was then Israel, who in the year 701 before the Common Era sieged Jerusalem. It was the last of the major cities to be sieged. Everything else had been conquered, not just in Israel, but this massive power had conquered much of the Middle East. And then, as described in that account in 2 Kings, which also does include, interestingly, quotes of Isaiah in the historical part separate from Isaiah, chapters 36 and 37, they got up in the morning, having been surrounded by 150,000 plus troops, and the troops had left. And there's a sense in this psalm that it's either written in response to that in the moment or as part of the national history of God delivering the people from a mighty foe as the sun rose. You'll see that echo. And I won't take the time, but there's a lot of words from Isaiah in 36 and 37 that are echoed in this psalm. So that's a popular attribution. What's not clear is whether this psalm is written in the ecstasy of victory with a quality of hyperbole that comes out of feeling expansive, or it's written in a difficult time as encouragement, looking to the future, maybe looking back at a victory, but not in the immediacy of victory, but in a need for the taste of hope. So all that will come together. And what I'll point out is how verse 5, for one of my favorite commentators, Benjamin Siegel, is for him the key why this is all hyperbole. I'll show it to you in a moment. And then something else I'm going to point out to you. Another friend, Rabbi Martin Cohen, who's in Long Island, but he used to be at Temple Eilat in Mission Viejo, a prolific writer, wrote a commentary to Psalms with a creative translation. I often quote him, and his book is entitled Haven and Strength, here in verse 2. So his entire study of 150 Psalms comes down to verse 2. And I wrote him a letter on Sunday telling him I was going to be teaching this, and I will read a paragraph from him about why he chose Haven and Strength. And last, I'm going to go back to my gift from Rabbi Adir Glick, which is this line often used in meditation circles, be still and know that I am God, in verse 11. So with that, some things I'm going to reread it now with some of my commentary, moving through it more fluidly in order to focus in particularly on verses 5 and 11. But you'll see this psalm has the word Selah. And Selah, as we've learned in poetry, is often a musical notation. It's also a dividing line. So verse 4 ends with Selah, as does verse 8. You get Selah again. So often this psalm by commentators is divided into three parts. The first will deal with nature, the middle with geopolitical struggle, and the last, a vision of peace. Last, before I begin to read, I am fascinated with what's at the center of a psalm, to often characterize what is the goal of a psalm. And the center verse is verse 7. Nations roar, kingdoms collapse, God gives voice, the earth melts. Which is to say, nations may act as if they have power, but ultimate power is with God. And that's, if you will, the thread underlying this particular psalm. Though the middle word, I get a little obsessive with counting, is in verse 6, and not counting the first verse, and which is the introduction, and that is balamot, which means will not collapse. God is in the midst of her, and she will not collapse. So that sense of, or not stumble, that sense of solidity that comes with God's presence to those who rely on God. And that brings me to one last theme, and then I'll go through it, and that is you'll hear a lot of rumblings, a lot of sound, particularly in the beginning. And that'll take us to verses 5 and 6. For at the center is Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is at peace. another theme. A lot going on in this psalm, and at the same time, seamless. For the conductor, for the sons of Korach, alamot, a song. It's not clear what alamot is, if it's a musical instrument, if it's young maidens, if it means hidden knowledge. Lots of commentary, more commonly understood as one of those musical instruments played in the temple. God is for us a haven and strength, a help in straits, in Surus, right? B'tsarot. God is a help in Surus, so intensely present. And I chose to use Martin Cohen's translation since I'll be coming back to him, namely haven and strength, and his translation of Nimtza Ma'od as literally so very much found or so intensely present. Therefore, we will not fear. I've emphasized throughout Psalms, the most repeated line in Hebrew scripture is, you shall not fear. We will not fear. Though the earth reels and though mountains collapse in the heart of the seas. Now that again sounds like an earthquake. Though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains shake at the surging, Selah. Benjamin Siegel will say, this extreme description of the sounds and the motion and the vulnerability of the earth suggests God's power, but again, it's kind of the extreme. It's not necessarily linked to an earthquake that occurred, though they do occur in Jerusalem and Israel from time to time, but rather it's this exuberance of expression of God's power. Now, verse 5, a river's streams make happy the city of God. That's Jerusalem, the holiest dwelling of the Most High. And here's the controversy. There is no river stream in Jerusalem. There is an underground water, but it's by no means a nahar. And so for Benjamin Siegel, calling Jerusalem or identifying Jerusalem as with a mighty river, that's hyperbole. Jonathan Alter will translate this in that light as a rivulet for the streams, or a spring with rivulets, but because again, in his footnote, he'll say there is no river as such in Jerusalem. There's a river near, the Jordan is about 20 miles away. The Gihon, again, is this underground stream. And so in sum, Robert Alter translates Nahar to fit the historical reality of Jerusalem as a stream with rivulets rather than a river with streams. And for Benjamin Siegel, it's but one example of how this psalm is of hyperbole. God is in the midst of her. This again is Jerusalem. She will not collapse. God will help her at the approach of morning or at the approach of dawn in the King James Version. Could be either, which is why that story that I shared of Sennacherib is linked, because it was with the rise of the sun in the morning that this mighty foe disappeared. In the book of Kings, 2 Kings, it'll say that the soldiers were all dead in the morning, but in other places they seem to simply have fled. No one knows why, historically, but a miracle that is linked. Nations roar. Now this is the middle section. God's power in the political, geopolitical realm. Nations roar, kingdoms collapse. God gives voice. The earth melts. Adonai of hosts is with us. And this name, Adonai Tzvaot, is, part of the Song of the Sea. It's the military God. And the word Yud-He Vav-He does not tend to appear in this the second book of Psalms. And commentators will say it's only here because there's an emphasis on God as power, Tzvaot, And since God's name often goes with the Adonai with it, it becomes Adonai Tzvaot, because now it's God who's the military power. And then Adonai remains in verse 9. Actually, this second of the 5 books of Psalms is often called the Elohimist book, because here God's name, unlike the first book of Psalms, is usually Elohim. Back to the text. Adonai of hosts is with us. A fortress is the God of Jacob, Selah. Go behold the works of Adonai, who has placed desolations on the earth. One little commentary, because you know I love names and the giving of blessings. There is a comment in the Talmud, Brachot 7a, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, regarding verse 9. He says, don't read it when it says Shemot as desolations on the earth. Read it instead of who has placed names on the earth, for names are destiny determined by God, which is in this verse and that commentary from the Talmud and Brachot, where names get emphasized, quoting this psalm, as powerful destiny makers. Now, to move toward 9, and then the Messianic. So God has this power. Now back to the literal reading, to desolate the earth, whether by earthquake, whether by war. God has the power. But now look at the shift in verse 10. Ceasing wars to the ends of the earth, breaking the bow and severing the spear, burning the chariots in the fire. Messianic. It's, in the future time when God will turn the swords into plowshares. So here we have that same trajectory of turmoil with Jerusalem at peace, but a world in violence that will become ultimately redeemed by God. And then verse 11, let go. When you have ... I put in the ... it's not in the Hebrew, but that's what's contained here. It's either desist, be still, let go, all in this word harpu, which I did some research on in terms of the concordance. Harpu occurs 46 times in Tanakh, only 3 times in Psalms. We saw it once before in Psalm 37, verse 8. Cease from anger, haraf, ma'af, va'azav chama. You can hear the rhyming, haraf, ma'af, cease from anger. So let go or cease and know that I am God. So it gets filled in. Ellipsis means ... a blank to fill in. It can be let go other nations of fighting Israel. It can be let go of fear and know that I am God. Let go of idolatry. You can, of course, fill in the let go in so many possible ways. And know that I am God, I shall be exalted among the nations. I shall be exalted upon the earth. And I shall be exalted is often linked to that messianic notion that when all the nations, it goes from the particular to the universal, right? I shall be exalted among the nations, plural, arum bagoyim. So there's this sense of a universal trajectory of acclaim. Let go of false beliefs and know that I am God. I shall be exalted. Then, put in the word then, I shall be uniformly recognized. And that's Zephaniah and also Zechariah. In that day, all will know my name is one. And now verse 12 is a repeat of verse 8. Adonai of hosts is with us. A fortress is the God of Jacob. So I have an eye always on the clock. We have 5 more minutes for my sharing. I want to now read to you a paragraph from Martin Cohen in response to my letter about his having chosen to name his psalm, his book, a lot of work and commentary for God is our haven and our strength, verse 2. So I wrote him on Sunday and I said, tell me why you chose that verse or phrase, and he wrote as follows: God is our haven and our strength, a source of help fully present in times of trouble. The key words are nimtza ma'od, the Hebrew for fully present, not, quote, vaguely existent, unquote, not theoretically real, not more or less there, and it seems always more less than more, but, quote, fully present, just as you yourself must be when you lift up your heart in prayer and address God, either in word or deed. Fully present means just what it sounds like it must mean, that the whole point of calling out to God in times of trouble, of laboring to come to think of God as a source of strength and as a haven, the whole point of all that effort is to accept God as fully present in your life. Forget that and you become the spiritual equivalent of individuals who attempt to find true love in their lives by reading romance novels. So actually, this paragraph that I just read is excerpted from, he wrote me his most recent book, but he excerpted this paragraph in response to the question, because this paragraph also quotes this phrase of God is haven and our strength, a source of help fully present in times of trouble. And he underlines fully present. And likewise, to pull this together, this quote that I knew but didn't know where it was from, Harpu Udu, verse 11, Ki Anochi Elohim, let go and know that I am God, is also elliptical for a meditation practice. Let go of all analytic thoughts. Let go of all your worries. Let go of all your planning and focus, and know that I am God. And so that's the same message in verse 11 conveyed in verse 2. That's the penultimate verses emphasizing what seems to be the same spiritual message, namely, God is for us a haven and strength, a help in straits, so intensely present, or if you will, when we are intensely present, let go and know that I am God. I shall be exalted among the nations. I shall be exalted upon the earth. With that, I look for some of your reactions to Psalm 46. There's always so much more to share, and maybe you'll give me prompts. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Try to, again, just one core idea so that others will share too.
I'm mostly focused on verse 5 when you were talking about the streams of the river.
Yes.
So I just wanted to point out there are probably about 10 streams of rivers in and around Jerusalem. Everybody can Google it out, but I'll just name, for example, En Chendak, En Kislon, En Lavan, En Mevaser. That's actually the entrance to Jerusalem by Mevaser Tion. En Limon, En Uzi. En is stream, or a stream of a river. Okay. So there are plenty of water streams going in and around Jerusalem. And that's probably what the psalmist here refers to when he says, the streams of a river will please the city of holy, the holy city.
So let me stop you there, Mike, and let me reframe what you shared. And what Mike points out is in and around Jerusalem, there are many waters that have names, and maybe that's what he's referring to. The challenge is those are ulai plege, those are rivulets, or streams, but those are not nahar. Those are not rivers, as every commentator has commented in looking at this. As a result, Rashi, the biblical commentator, will say this is referring not to this current Jerusalem, but to the Garden of Eden, where there are rivers coming out of the Garden of Eden. Ibn Ezra in the Middle Ages will say that this refers to Gihon, which is the largest in under Jerusalem. And so it is from Gihon, an underground waterway, that you will get the rivulets into Jerusalem. So the tension is specifically the word Nahar and how Nahar is used elsewhere in the Bible, which suggests something more significant than a stream. That's a river. Other comments and reactions? So let me give you some of the poetry, and maybe I'll get another question in a moment. Listen to verse 4. Though the waters roar and foam is the English translation, but listen to how it bubbles in Hebrew. Yehemu, yechmeru, meimav. And so that's one element of the poetry of Psalm, is this omnotopia, the sense of the choice of words that have that quality. Just like that word I pointed out at the very end, the one harpu, be still, in Psalm 37, haraf ma'af, cease from anger, but it's in Hebrew, haraf ma'af. So there's this cadence. And as I noted, there are many words chosen here that are used in Isaiah, somehow hearkening an echo back to the story of King Sennacherib of Assyria. Any other thoughts or reactions? So if not, let me give a preview for tomorrow. Tomorrow's psalm, Psalm 47, is a psalm read in the Ashkenazic tradition 7 times each day on Rosh Hashanah, in that it's a psalm about shofar blowing. And it's a psalm about the coronation of a divine king modeled on the images of a human king. So it's a national coronation psalm, just like today's psalm was also a national psalm of divine victory, but with ambiguities in terms of the message. I was deeply moved by this psalm as a text for the memorial of September 11th, but now perhaps we understand a little bit more, because this is a psalm about the sounds of collapse in the beginning, here earthquake-like, but that ultimately leads to this messianic vision, ceasing wars to the ends of the earth, breaking the bow and severing the spear, burning the chariots in the fire. Let go and know that I am God. Thank you, each of you. Last word, Richard, and then we'll do Kaddish.
I think Vivian had her hand up momentarily.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vivian. Vivian, you have to unmute.
I heard Obama doing this. I thought am I unmuted?
Yes.
I thought, as I have thought once before in this series, of the civil rights song, We Shall Not Be Moved. And it's as if he was taking the strength of God into himself, because it goes on, for like a tree that standeth by the water, we shall not be moved. And I thought for the explosion of 9/11, that is a consoling thought.
Thank you, Vivian. And I want to just point out that the middle 2 words of this Psalm 47 are, we will not, is not moved, Bal Timot. So that's really dead center in terms of the feel of what also gets at the heart of that message of why this psalm, despite tragedy, we will not be moved, we will not be afraid, we will look to the future with hope of a world of harmony. Truly, again, I get goosebumps as I'm summing up with you present, to be reminded of both the power of these psalms written 2,000 plus years ago, and how there is this spiritual core that continues to uplift us all the more in times where we need to know that we will not be moved. So Kaddish, and again, I want to say to Sharon and to Phyllis condolences on the passing of their mother. They're still in the midst of Shiva, and I want to honor the memory of Anne Glatt, Hannah Miriam, as others are invited to join together for the reciting of Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Amen.
Alma
Yama
Dibra
Dibra
Kirute,
Kirute
Yamliach
Malkute
Malkute,
Chayefon
B'chayekon,
Uvyamechon
Uchaye
Ufayed
B'chol
Bechobet
Israel,
Israel
Ba'agala Uvizman
Uvitman
Karim,
Karir
Vimru,
Vimru
Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shmei
Mei Rabba
Bara,
Devara
Le'olam
Le'olam Olamei Amaya
Omaya, Yitbarach,
Yibarak Vishtabach
V'yitabach, V'yitba'ar,
Yitba'ar
V'yitromam,
Yitroma
V'yitnaseh,
Yitnase
V'yitadar,
Yitadar
V'yitaleh,
Vitala
V'yitalal,
Vitala
Shemei
Mei
Kusha,
Tukrusha
Barichu,
Riyaku
Riku.
Le'ela,
Layla Minko
Minko, Birchata,
Bechata
Shirata,
Bishtrata Tushpetata
Tushpachata, V'nechemata,
Nefemata
Da'amiran
Tamiran
Yoma,
Ma
V'imru,
Umru
Amen.
Amen
Amen.
Yehei
Ye Shla
Rama
Rabban
Rabba
Shma
Min Shemaya
Maya
V'chaim
Yimalin
Aleinu V'chol
Yaakov Israel
Yisrael
Imru Amen
Amen. Osei
Shalom
Shalom
Bimruma
B'Rav
Hu
Yaseh
Yaseh
Shalom
Shalom
Aleinu
Alim
V'chol
V'Yakol Yisrael
Yisrael V'chol
Kol
Yoshei
Yoshvi
Tevel
Tevel
V'imru.
Amen.
Amen.
All wishes of a good day. Terry, much success to you in all your endeavors. It's wonderful to have people from far and wide and to have people from close to home sharing in the study of Psalms. Thanks to each of you.